I'm Scott Stevens, president of the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. I joined Rotary over 8 years ago because I believe in service, membership, and giving back to the community. Rotary Club of Harrisburg is the number 23rd club in the entire world. We have over 100 members and we've been around for over 100 years. We're part of Rotary International, which has over 1.4 million members, all seeking to do good in the world. If you'd like to learn more, please check us out on the socials and learn more at hbgrotary.org. Thanks.
I do this on behalf of the program committee, and these are the words of the scribe John Moorfield joining us virtually. If you remember November 8th, the Wall Street Journal headline screamed, and it was above the fold, which we love for this region, inside the audacious plan to reopen 3 Mile Island. 3 days later, the New York Times lead article in the business section read, "A symbol of nuclear peril may now herald a nuclear rebirth." On that very same day, we met in this room on Veterans Day. We were discussing the changing nature of warfare, considering artificial intelligence's impact on the U.S. military as compared to China, with a leader from the U.S. Army War College. An individual query in ChatGPT, Copilot, or any other AI engine requires 10 times more electricity than a simple Google search. As AI has been taking hold across the world, this upward demand for electricity has real-world consequences just down the river. There we go. The arrangement with Microsoft creates a 20-year investment in our community. This conversation today is the second in a planned series of events here at Rotary on AI's impact in our community. And today I am pleased to introduce Dave Marcheskie, Constellation's Community Relations Manager. Some of you may recognize Dave from his days as an award-winning broadcast journalist and anchor at ABC 27, just down the road. Following his work there, he went to work at 3 Mile Island as the senior site communication manager prior to the announced shutdown in 2019. Dave is a graduate of Ursinus College and lives with his family near Westchester. Dave?
Thanks for having me here today. I did prepare like a presentation. We'll go through some slides. Thank you. And I will say, I know John's on the line here. He reached out in the fall time and said, "Hey, we'd love to have you come out. How's February 10th? I said, "Fine." As an Eagles fan, I should have looked at the date and been more confident. Exactly. So, I'm glad to be here and, a little tired, but it's all good. So, especially after a victory. Let's see. Oh. There we go. All right, just a quick slide about me. I think Ryan pretty much summed it up, but I did work for ABC 27 for about 8 years, lived right up a block of here in Harrisburg. Loved my time there. Ironically, I kind of got out of media as a whole because I felt I kind of saw the way social media was steering the narrative and steering how people consumed media. And I just thought maybe the longevity for my time in local news and news as a whole may had a ceiling. So I was looking for some great opportunities outside in public TMI, in which, so last Friday was my 8-year anniversary. So I started in 2017, 2 months there. Hey, we're going to announce shutdown. So good move on my part. No, I'm just kidding. No, it really has been great. For those 2 years from 2017 to 2019, we tried our best to keep the plant open, and we'll discuss a little bit that in a second. But now, just kind of full circle, I left there in 2019 to go work at some of our other plants. I worked for Limerick Generating Station outside of Philadelphia, Peach Bottom in York, and some of other Mid-Atlantic power assets. Conowingo Dam was a big part of the portfolio. Then I migrated there, worked for our commercial team, which is kind of the retail side of our business. And I'd worked with Microsoft previously on some of the other contracts that our company did, and that plays a big role into why we're here today. My current role, which is somewhat modified from my previous role, site communications manager, was an umbrella role of government relations. You did internal communications, external communications. You were the site spokesperson. This role now has kind of morphed and changed a little bit to community relations manager, still the site spokesperson, but the big part is now I'm overseeing it's $1 million budget over the next 5 years for charitable giving and workforce development. So it's about $200,000 a year starting this year. And we have David Carl in the room here. We've kind of made some outreach that we're going to do $25,000 to the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. Hasn't been announced publicly yet. We're going to talk about some of those things, but our team is actually going to stuff some boxes next week. So looking forward to those relationships. And Dr. Ski, you're going to get a call later in the year as well as part of our workforce development with some of the programs that you have offered at HAC. We also offered $25,000 to the Lower Dauphin Communities That Care bookmobile on Giving Tuesday as our first round of charitable giving. So that's, to me, that was a big draw of coming back to this project, seeing the plant kind of reopen and having those community relations, those roots, and helping all the people in this room, really cement ourselves in the community and having those dollars behind us, which is great. For the next couple slides, I kind of just want to do a little base layer, some nuclear 101. So we're calling it the Crane Clean Energy Center. Chris Crane was the former CEO of Exelon, and he passed away spring of last year. So when it kind of came about that we would want to reopen, a lot of the internal folks thought it was a great way to honor his legacy, to rename Fremont Island Chris Crane, or just Crane Clean Energy Center, after him. He was a big part in developing a lot of the safety programs after the '79 accident for TMI Unit 2. Institute of Nuclear Power Operators, which is called INPO. He helped the NRC develop a lot of their safety and guardrails to what the industry is today, is one of the safest industries in energy in the world, on par with both wind and solar. But just kind of laying out, so Unit 1 itself, everybody knows Unit 1 and Unit 2, two separate units at the site. Unit 1 began commercial operation in '74. Exelon, at the time, purchased Unit 1 in '99 and began operations in 2000. And this is kind of where I just want to kind of level set. So Exelon and Constellation split as a company in 2022. Constellation, which is the company I work for now, took all the generation assets. So all the nuclear power plants, everything that makes the power now falls under the umbrella of Constellation, and then Exelon took all the utilities. So Pepco, Pico in Philadelphia, ComEd out in Chicago, all those utilities. TMI Unit 1 at the time was granted a license renewal in 2009. Brand new transformer was put in there in '09, and the license at the time was granted towards 2034. So when the plant shut down in September 20th of 2019, it wasn't for any plant conditions, it was purely economic reasons. So at the time of retirement, it was one of the strongest performing plants in the industry. The unit capacity factor was over 99%, which means how much you're making energy. So a power plant can run for 2 years straight. And then once a year it shuts down, the unit shuts down, and it puts fuel in there. They kind of change the tires a little bit. So there's 144 fuel rods inside of a core. You'll see a picture in a second, but you kind of replace 1/3 of that, add a new third, rearrange it to maximize its efficiency, and then it can run for another 2 years. So that's why it's called base load power, and it's impervious to weather or extreme conditions, unlike some other generation power. So this is kind of just a very rudimentary schematic of what a nuclear power plant does. When you generate electricity, we're all doing the same thing. We're all creating steam in some form or another. So we use the reactor to create heat. So if you think about it for like 3 rings for a second. We have a closed loop here. So the reactor vessel splitting the atoms creates the heat. This is the closed loop. This doesn't enter anything. This is all just water that's contained in here. This water creates the steam, something called super steam, which turns the turbine and cranks the generator. The electricity goes out to the switch yard, out to the grid, which the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, or you've heard of PJM grid, covers 16 states. And if you think about it like a heart, it pumps out where demand is most. So if it's really got a cold snap in maybe some of the northern states, that grid's going to pump out the electricity out there. And the PJM grid is centered in Audubon, Pennsylvania, which is kind of right near the Limerick power plant outside of Philadelphia. All right. Okay. And then there's a third loop, which is all based upon cooling. So most power plants are next to some sort of body of water. So TMI, or Clean Energy Center now, is next to the Susquehanna River. Beach Bottom is upstream. We have Limerick on the Schuylkill River. Some are near the ocean, some are near lakes. And this is what we call an open loop. So this draw from the river keeps everything nice and cool inside. And then the cooling towers that you see, that's all it is water vapor. It's not steam, it's not smoke. The only emissions that come out of a nuclear power plant are these water droplets. So you can touch it and it's cool to the touch. My 5-year-old son likes to call it the cloud factory because that's essentially what it is. And so then when we talk about nuclear energy as a clean energy source or carbon-free source, everybody goes, well, what about the waste? Here we go. What about it? So we can talk about it. So there's two types of storage. It's what we call wet storage. So remember I was saying you take those fuel rods and you kind of replace them. Then you take the spent fuel rods, you put it into an Olympic-sized pool, spent fuel pool, and it decays heat there for about 5 years. And then it gets put into these canisters, these concrete canisters called dry cask storage. And then they get placed onto a pad. And over at the site now, the pad is the size of about a tennis court. And I think there's about 40 of these canisters out there, and you can go up and touch them. The way it's designed, that the canisters, the fuel goes inside, and if you kind of look, you kind of see some vents at the top, which is for airflow to kind of keep them cool. And it's protected 24/7. They're behind fencing and guards, and it's a very small footprint. I've heard there are 94 reactors in America, and they all do the same thing. Like this, our plant is not special to any other plant that is in America, but if you were to take all the canisters and put them all in the same location, it would fill a Target. So it seems big, but when you think about all the other, waste storage, it's a pretty small footprint. Again, it doesn't emit any emissions into the atmosphere as opposed to a fossil fuel plant, right? Like you've got Bruner Island right down the road there. That's a coal burning plant. And you see it goes up into the air that we breathe all the time. So that is the big difference of what we say this is climate friendly and a clean energy center when it comes to storing our waste. Now, when TMI shut down in 2019 due to economic reasons, we couldn't sell our power. So at the time, because there was an abundance of natural gas, especially in Pennsylvania, the price for power was maybe around $19 per megawatt hour. We were selling our price at TMI Unit 1 for about $40 megawatt hour. You're going to buy $40 eggs, or you're going to buy $19 eggs, which is probably about the price they are right now. So that was the reason why we had to shut down. Plus, we're a single unit plant at the time, which we didn't generate twice as much electricity as other power plants, and the demand wasn't there. Well, shortly after 2019, especially with the emergence of the pandemic, where everybody kind of went home and relied more on their home electricity, and everybody's using computers more than we've ever done. Amazon had a growth of explosion due to the pandemic as well, so they're going to have warehouses and data centers. And with the emergence of AI especially, that is really what is increased the demand by thousands of %. And there are just, grabbed a couple of headlines just to show you as an example, that they're saying like 2030, 2035, we're going to hit this tipping point of there's just not going to be enough energy to support this growing industry. So the tech companies now are reaching out, trying to find any sorts of power. And I was telling Ryan this story, and I don't know how publicly we've been forward with it, but to restart the plant wasn't really our idea initially. It was, we were reached out to by the Department of Energy and the Commonwealth right around the same time saying, is this even possible? And I asked our strategy folks internally at one point, and they didn't know because it's never been done before and what the regulatory hurdles might be. So they didn't think it was even feasible to do it. But when they reached out, it was around the springtime of last year, I think our company says, well, let's see what we've done. I mean, the past 5 years, we took the plant offline, started the decommissioning process, and everything in nuclear is written out to the line. It's an industrial safety place, so it's like they just had a reverse course of what they've done over the last 5 years, and realized that as long as the plant was in good working order, like it was when it shut down, it should be fine. And the big part was that transformer that they got in 2009. So even though the plant was built in 74, there's been new parts that have been upgraded and added over the years. And they did the stress test to that transformer, realized it's fine, even though it sat dormant for 5 years, it's good to go. NRC came in, took a look at it, realized it's good to go. So I think, you know, we can move forward. Now, the next hurdle was, okay, who's going to pay for it? And I think if you go to the next slide, we saw Palisades in Michigan were the first one to announce they're going online spring of last year. And that one was back, they were a little different. They were decommissioned for 2 years. So even their operators still have their license. When our plant shut down, everybody moved away, myself included. And they were about 2 months away from what's called Safe Store, where it's just going to sit dormant for the next 50 years. And you had 50 or fewer employees on site, mostly security, just kind of taking a look at the plant. So when Palisades in Michigan first announced, hey, we're going to come back online, backed by an Amazon deal, I think it started perking the ears of the rest of the tech giants in the industry, saying, huh, okay. We got reached out to by Microsoft, and I guess negotiations were underway all summer. And so in September, we announced that we're going to restart. Ironically, on the same date, the contract was signed, I think, on a Wednesday, and we announced on Friday, September 20th, exactly 5 years to the date where it shut down. And it just kind of worked out that way. I mean, as a PR guy, it was great. It was a great story, good media. But it really was down to the wire, and figured it out. So if you go to the next slide, what this deal is and what this deal isn't. So like Palisades with Amazon, there's something called co-location. So there are some deals out there that they want to build a data center to support AI right next to the power plant itself, and almost as a direct hookup, you know, to get that energy. What our deal is not a co-located project. No matter what you hear, there is no plans, and Microsoft has said this, we're saying this, there's not enough room, honestly, to build a data center at our plant. So there's not going to be a co-located thing. So what this deal does is essentially buy our electricity off the grid for the next 20 years, starting when we go online. So we, Constellation, are putting in $1.6 billion of private investment to do all the work that needs to be done to go back online. And Microsoft is buying that electricity for the next 20 years. When we go back online, we're selling a megawatt hour now, about $200 per megawatt. That's a far cry from $40. And they're locking these deals in now because that couple slides ago, we said that's going to be a tipping point in 2030, 2035. Like a price per megawatt hour is going to be insane. I have a buddy who works for the grid, and he was telling me over the weekend that they're looking at like $400, $500 per megawatt hour in the next 10 years. So these companies want to lock in these deals now, trying to find any power source they can. Microsoft has been a company partner with us. They have a big sustainability effort. You know, while Bill Gates doesn't, you know, he's not the current CEO of Microsoft, but he has influence, and he's a big supporter of nuclear energy and something called SMR, small modular reactors, which he's currently building out in Wyoming, hoping to get that up and running. So that's something that, you know, is also a next wave because these companies need the energy. Now, what our deal also does is because our electricity goes to the grid and then goes out, and we don't know where they're building their data center yet. We don't know if it's Pennsylvania. We've heard it might be Virginia. They already have one in Virginia. The best way I can describe it is you got a big lake, right? Somebody draws water off a lake here. Somebody draws water off a lake over here. that's kind of what it is. Like, we're putting our electricity onto the grid, and the Microsoft might draw it off somewhere in another state, somewhere else. But they have a set price over the next 20 years that they're going to buy that electricity. That essentially is why we're opening up. That's the only reason. Now, there's a lot of benefits for a plant opening up. We've got 3,400 jobs in total. That's including contractors. As Ryan said, our HR is telling us that the full complement's going to be about 730 full-time jobs at the plant. Those tax dollars are going to go back. We're going to have about 150 boomerang employees, so people that left, go work at other plants, at Peach Bottom, Limerick, or Calvert in Maryland. They're going to come back to the area, which is what I'm proud of, because you can buy a house here again, get your roots down there again, and it's the Girl Scouts, it's the Boy Scouts, it's the Little League teams, it's that stuff that community really matters, and having those people back is something I'm really looking forward to. Trying to think what else. Talked about the $1 million. Yeah, and I mean, it's good for the state as well, the $16 billion in state GDP. I know Ryan and I were talking a little bit. Our CEO and the governor met last spring. I think the governor was very supportive of the idea of a restart. And I think even in his budget address announced that he could put funds toward it. And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not asking for anything. For us, like we almost would rather just do it privately and not have to do it on the backs of the ratepayers or taxpayers. And as a PR guy, it's easier to defend than saying, hey, we have to come with our hand out and asking for millions of dollars for this. So the fact that this was a private contract, a private agreement, is great for business. And then this is the last slide I have here, just to show you that this will these are the Constellation-owned assets that they're calling the Susquehanna Clean Energy Corridor. So when Crane comes back online, we'll have 835 megawatts of energy going to the grid. Peach Bottom Clean Energy Center, down the road there near York and Delta, Pennsylvania, is going to go through something called uprates. So they're going to take a look at what are some of the ways we can squeeze some extra megawatts out of the plant. Typically, these plants, you can't get more out than what you already have. That's kind of the problem with the demand, is a lot of these generation assets, unless you build more or new, it's kind of hard to get more out of than what you already have. So they're going to take a look at some efficiency measures at Peach Bottom to try to get a few more megawatts. We have the Conowingo Dam downstream in the Susquehanna, as well as the Muddy Run Pump Storage, which is right next to Peach Bottom. Both hydro dams, and I did a little work with both of them. If you ever get out to Muddy Run, there's an observatory there, just, sidebar. It's really cool. They do a lot of great field trips and planetary visits and observations out there. So it's kind of a neat spot. That was kind of just wanted to give a baseline of why we're restarting the facility, why we shut down. I did talk a little bit about AI, but you can see that the demand is just kind of off the charts. And now it's almost an arms race between all the big companies of Amazon and Meta and Microsoft and Google to try to figure out, hey, how can we get this energy? And they're looking to nuclear power plants because of our emissions-free portfolio. What you've seen in some articles is if that's not enough, they're going to have to rely on more gas and even maybe bring back coal, which is what we don't want to happen. So if there's a way that we could restart some of these decommissioned plants, or if the technology catches up in the next 5 years to implement small modular reactors, we could feasibly have those on our plants, even like a Crane or a TMI, have one of those SMRs on our plant that's already, the infrastructure is there in a way that the switchyard is there, so you can hook up to the electricity to get energy to the grid. Security's already there. We're a couple years off from that. Our company did announce we're going to get one up in New York, at one of our plants in New York, in the next year or so. So I think it's coming, and it's going to be creative and unique ways to maximize the energy in the community. Again, jobs, as far as business goes, bringing people back to the area. And an operating plant shuts down every 2 years to refuel, and an extra 2,500 contractors come on board for a 3 to 4 week blitz, stay in the local hotels, visit the local restaurants, they get stipends. We order a ton of food. That's what we always do, like business with Roberto's Pizza in Middletown and some others. So I know they're glad that we're back too. Um, but that's kind of, I just wanted to lay it out there, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yep.
I guess the question that I have to ask you, because I live in that area.
Yeah.
And the PR from Eric, your good friend Eric, as I see you laughing. I mean, they've been out there pretty well doing a lot of PR to oppose you, as you know.
Mhm.
And so I'm hearing your side of the story. I've never heard your side of the story, but I've been hearing their side of the story. So what is your plan to make the citizens that live in Middletown and Lower Soterra Township feel safe about reopening?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, a couple of things, and that's part of this new role as well, coming here, speaking to you fine folks. But we're going to start going to township meetings. Londonderry Township is where the plant sits, going to township meetings once a quarter. We have a new person coming on board as well. It's called Local Government Affairs, so they're going to be working with the township officials, county officials. We have somebody in state government affairs that talk to the legislators to keep them up to date and apprised of what we're doing. We are planning, again, this hasn't been announced yet, but to have a community event in the springtime. And with that will come what we usually call a state of the plant, and invite some of those local leaders, those stakeholders, bring them in, show them kind of almost what I showed you, maybe a little bit more, and in a closed setting like this, without media, so you can answer questions. And then we've been doing a ton of media tours. So CBS Sunday Morning is coming out. The piece was supposed to air yesterday. But that's going to come out in 2 weeks because they wanted to talk to the Microsoft CEO. I personally have done more than 20 media tours, local media. We've had Penn Live come out, all the 4 broadcast stations here, the NPR station. We've had national publications come out. We have on deck Fox News, ABC News. We've had Lester Holt come out with NBC News. So we're trying to get the word out as best we can through some of those channels. I'm also developing a social media channel where I can, locally try to combat some of what Eric and some of the other antis are saying. I'll say this with Eric, and him and I have spoken. He's not a personal enemy. He's against of what we do. But there's we have a respect and communication. So we talk. He knows what we're doing, and I know what he does half the time. But Eric's been doing this a long time. You know what I mean? Like he's been out there forever. I don't think it's ever going to change no matter what we do. He's never going to be satisfied. I mean, that's kind of where it's at. And the media go to him because he's there. So I'm also trying to train the media. Hey, if you do an interview with Eric, talk to me. I'm here. So we're getting there. Yeah, Char?
Hi. As one of those people who got arrested for blocking the gates of 3 Mile Island, I frown because you can only take the fossil fuels denial of climate change so far. I'm into nuclear. Actually, the SMRs are right on, and I was hoping that with Bill Gates and what he's doing in Wyoming, that would be the technology that came here. I do question what happens with the water that you take out of Susquehanna and what temperature it is afterwards, but that's not what I want to direct. I think that.
Well, you could look, I'll just real quick on that. I mean, you could look at the reports. The water comes out about the same temperature, if not a couple degrees warmer. It's all regulated. It's not like we're doing anything different than Beach Bottom's doing upstream or any other power plant next to a body of water. The fish seem to like it.
But obviously we know that the difference in temperature affects the ecosystem.
Sure.
Anyways, so where are we at in terms of getting small modular reactors up and running? And because there's like Westinghouse has one that's portable and it's run on batteries and it doesn't take all that water. And then the next step is how, then you don't have to worry about the national power grid because if we had a better national power grid, we wouldn't be having a lot of these discussions.
Yeah, I mean, On SMRs in general, and those are, to me, are two separate things. The grid or the infrastructure is antiquated and outdated, needs to be updated and modernized for sure. And I think that those efforts are happening, but by the grid operator. And it's kind of weird because the utilities also own all the power lines. So they're the ones that have to upgrade. So like PICO, PPL in this area, they're the ones in charge of that. So that's a little separate. For as far as SMRs, as our company, as what we're being told internally, they're all on board as much as they can get it up and running. And a lot of it is regulatory.
What's going to happen? Are they going to lose funding now?
I think that's to be, yeah, I mean, we see the current administration is trying to unravel what the IRA did. Now, there was no provisions of funding in there for, like, for TMI specifically or Crane for restart, but there was funding streams in there for, I don't know what the exact language was, but basically like new clean energy generation. But I think it was geared towards the SMRs. So, yeah, I know our government affairs folks are still trying to figure out what that's going to look like. But as we're putting one at one of our New York spots as a pilot program. And I think if that gets up and running and is successful, we own 12 plants and 22 reactors. And if you're our company and if that's a way to increase power and you already have the infrastructure to do that, I think we're going to see an SMR at just about every one of our plants in the future. But I think our focus now, and as what I can say as far as Crane goes, is that we're focused on restarting Crane as safely and efficiently as possible, hoping to get that online in 27. But I could see Microsoft saying, yeah, we want one too, so they're going to pay for it. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's going to be happening there. I'll say that's my opinion. I'll just preface that. Yeah.
Two-part question. First part for you. Can you explain some of the technology upgrades that are happening at the plant between now and 27 to some of that technology from 74 and 90 and 2000 that's in there that might help make it safer, make it more consistent, things like that? And then part two for Ryan over there probably. I'm thinking about Stargate. I'm thinking about how that ties into a lot of this stuff. I'm thinking about the data centers, keeping them local instead of finding them in Virginia. So what is the chamber plus Shapiro doing on that side to maybe be out in front of that?
Sure. I'll push back on your first part a little bit. So you mentioned, what are we doing to upgrade to make it safer, more efficient? So the one slide pointed out when it did shut down, it was one of the safest, most efficient plants in the world.
Drawing more power at that 800.
Yeah.
In the 16. Maybe.
That's fair. That was talked about internally, but I think that the focus is it's what we're calling restoration. Let's restore it to the plant the way it was in 2019 to get it up and running. But like everything else, I think they're going to try to do upgrades once, whatever it is, 4 years in, 5 years in, try to figure it out. But, now I think we're trying to get back online as safely and efficiently as possible. But yeah.
Yeah, Brian, and to your question, I can tell you that we're already receiving, site consultant projects. I'm guessing they're data centers based on the utility load, the land size, and the water requirements. It's pretty obvious. Like, you sometimes don't get the industry, right? What we get is we need access to this much power in these different areas. I think they're not very easy things to cite, I would say, though. They require flat land. They require, as Dave was alluding to earlier, significant amounts of water, and they require isolation. I think that's like they're not quiet places to have. If they can have significant light pollution. So you typically don't want to put it next to residential. Like you almost want to put it next to, agriculture or something of that nature. And then there are other issues with that, right? So it's this matchmaking game of trying to match up all those different pieces. And the most important one being the power piece. I think we can, as Dave talked, the grid's pretty constrained and strained right now. So we almost get those leads through PPL, right? Like they will say, here, we're going to draw a circle, and you got to find land there. And some of it's just stitching together multiple property owners to try to respond. So it's being done. It's happening. You've saw the headlines of the project in Cumberland County, but the utilities are driving some of that development too, because they're going to tell you, Brett might know some people that do that from PPL, but they will tell you where to locate a particular site. So yeah, it's happening. We're seeing, certainly when you saw the headlines, we almost instantly get leads from site consultants for those projects.
Other questions? Of our appreciation, you might have heard about this four-way testing. I've said it twice already. You can use this as a weapon to throw people or keep papers down.
I got it.